Hey folks, Graham Brown from Asia Tech Podcast here. This is Asia Matters, and we're heading to one of my favorite cities in the world, Mumbai, one of the biggest mega cities in the world. And one of the reasons I like it so much is just the energy and the chaos and the traffic in Mumbai. I'm not sure what it would be like to actually live there though, but it's a lot of fun going there for short visits. So in a city like Mumbai, as many cities in Asia, traffic, logistics, deliveries are a real challenge. So, how do you deliver parcels? How do you deliver packages? How do you deliver food to Mumbai's 20, 30 million residents, especially when they're increasingly demanding services like food delivery? They're working in offices. They have busy lives. They don't have families at home to make them food like they would in the traditional sense. So people are getting this stuff delivered, which creates a huge problem for a city like Mumbai. Not only is it huge, it's very chaotic. So enter the Dabbawallah. Now, Mumbai has its own Dabbawallah scene. Now, Dabbawallas are delivery guys. They are the guys that deliver on bikes, on foot, in many cases on the train services. And there are thousands of Dabbawallas across Mumbai. And what they'll do is they'll pick up the tiffin boxes or the dabba boxes, and they will pick up the deliveries for the day, and they will go out and they deliver them across Mumbai. In many cases, they'll do this without GPS phones. In almost all cases, without artificial intelligence or any kind of algorithm of such. And they've been doing this for over 100 years. So you could argue that Mumbai's last mile delivery service works very well. In fact, research has been done on Dabbawallas, and they found, and I'll quote here, that the rate of mistakes amongst Dabbawallas is 1 mistake in 8 million deliveries. Let me repeat that again. 1 mistake in 8 million deliveries. According to research by Subrata Chakravarti, they found that a Dabbawallah made a mistake almost never, and maybe once every 2 months. How about that? Almost never. So these guys are getting the job done by any means possible. And this is a theme that I talk about a lot in looking at emerging markets and innovation. There's a word in India called jugaad. Jugaad basically is about dirty innovation, if you like, fixes, getting the job done without necessarily having the resources. These guys don't have AI. These guys don't have the best GPS systems or even the best vehicles to get this done, or the best warehouses. But, they get it done, and they get it done highly effectively. So it'd be interesting to learn a little bit more about how they do that and what the secret of their success is. Maybe we don't need all this technology. However, it's not perfect, and especially for India's growing middle class. So yesterday I talked about India's growing middle class. We looked at those scenes coming out of IKEA in a different city in India, in Hyderabad, and the huge queues for IKEA's opening day, like tens of thousands of people queuing to get into IKEA, a mad rush, crazy scenes. Really what the story was about was India's growing middle class, and how that middle class is a part of a bigger story of Asia's middle class, growing from 700 million in 2009 to 3.5 billion in 2030, where 2/3 of the world's middle class will be living in Asia by 2030. Just think about that. So those middle class consumers have a different mindset that, okay, they enjoy seamless delivery services, but they want those services not tomorrow or not even later today. They want it within the next hour, especially when you consider that in the context of food delivery. So how do you make India's Dabbawallah system better? Because already you have the right guys, and by the way, they don't work for a lot of money. According to research, they get paid only 8,000 rupees a month, about $130 a month to do this. So you have a very cheap service as well. It's very effective. Along comes a 13-year-old kid. Now, this is Tilak Mehta. Tilak Mehta is a 13-year-old Mumbai resident. He's not particularly different to any other 13-year-old kid, except that he set up a service, an app called Papers and parcels, papers and parcels. That's P and NP. So Meta set up PNP because he thought he could do Dabbawallas better. Now, he didn't become a Dabbawallah himself, but he gave Dabbawallas the technology to make their life a bit easier. So he set up a last mile logistics service in Mumbai, and he did 4 months of research into this MVP of the product, and he launched P&P. And interestingly, there are kids out there, and this is not new, there are kids out there who are launching apps and developing apps and building businesses. That's nothing new. And particularly in Asia, that's nothing new. But what's really interesting about this kid is the numbers. I'll share those numbers with you in a minute. I just want to hear this chap speak so you can understand that this is actually the real deal. This is a 13-year-old kid.
Future plans, given this growth potential in the Indian market, we would of course be expanding this so that more and more people can experience world-class services.
Okay, there's a different riff there that maybe we'll come to in a minute, that he sounds like a 13-year-old, but he talks like a 35-year-old, talking about world-class delivery services when most 13-year-olds are still interested in Minecraft and Pokemon. So let's have a look at the numbers. I promised I'd share the numbers with you. So P&P, Papers and Parcels, the app employs 200 people. And these are not necessarily, I'm not quite sure, but it says 200 people here and 300 Dabbawallas. So they have 300 Dabbawallas, 300 of these guys running around for them of it on their own. So they must be on the payroll, and they have 200 of their own employees. 200 of their own employees. Just think about that. This kid is 13 years old. Just to remind you, this chap here is employing 500 people at age 13. I mean, just think about that in the context of every 13-year-old you've ever known, even yourself when you were 13. What were you doing? Now, Tilak Mehta has gone on record as saying that he wants to become a billionaire. So I think there's two parts to this story that I'd like to break down to understand it. The one is about Mumbai's Dabbawallas, the middle class, and it took a 13-year-old to disrupt that and make it better, which I think is an amazing story. And it just goes to show that innovation really can come from anywhere and anybody. That's anywhere in the planet and at any age. So I think that's a phenomenal story. And I find that fascinating because, think about that potential for India. So if you can get that in a city of 20 million, right, what would that look like in a country of 1.2 billion? So 60 times bigger. That would mean potentially that this chap here, Meta, would be employing 20,000 Dabbawallas. How old will he be by that age? 15, 16? So that's the first part of the story, which I think is phenomenal. And there's many takeaways for Asia and why Asia matters. Firstly being is that, this idea of innovation and where innovation comes from, innovation doesn't necessarily come out of accelerators or innovation labs. It can come from people like Tilak Mehta, which I think is really refreshing. And I think that's the future. So that's one of the takeaways for Asia Matters. And then I think there's another takeaway for Asia Matters, which is this whole idea of 10x, which is that, some of the biggest projects out there lie in countries like India, where they don't have established last mile delivery services on the same level that you would expect in somewhere like the US, which would be geared up to a service provider like Amazon, who could deliver Amazon Prime in a matter of 1 or 2 hours. So you have the opportunity to create these huge 10x project, 100x projects. And that's what gets, I think, real startup talent excited these days, that, they not necessarily are looking for the most well-paid jobs out there. They're really looking for the challenges that are really going to make a big impact on the world stage. And so potentially they lie in places like India. When you look at logistics, you look at smart cities and so on. So that's the first part of the story. And then the second part of the story is this whole idea about a 13-year-old kid wanting to become a billionaire. So I'm not 100% comfortable with this, and would love to hear your comments and your thoughts on this. Is that I think it's great that any 13-year-old kid wants to do something with their life and has sort of discovered what they're good at. And I think about my son at being 12 years old, and at that age, he's still very much focused on play and his friends and so on, and discovering himself. And, I very much encourage him to go out and to, see what's out in the world and experience the world and learn things and explore and so on. And, try and find what you're really good at and double down on what you're good at and find something you can be passionate about and learn about it and be hungry for that. I think that's great. I think every parent, every teacher needs to instill that in their children. However, a kid wanting to become a billionaire, I'm not so sure. I mean, what do you think? I'm not comfortable with that because I think that I wonder how much of Tilak Mehta's words were transplanted into him by his parents. And, they're living their lives vicariously through Tilak Mehta. I just find that interesting. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but, Asia, especially East Asia, Singapore here and India have the tiger moms. In India, they have their own equivalent of that. And there's a very positive side to it, as we're seeing with what Tilak Mehta is able to achieve. But there's also a downside to that. These very sort of hungry and ambitious middle-class parents who are pushing their children to achieve amazing things. There will be a cost to that as well. So it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on this story. I think overall, it excites me. The idea that, these Dabbawallas are this very analog solution to an analog problem are being brought into the digital world. That really excites me. And I think about the potential for that across Asia. And that's why Asia matters. My name's Graham Brown.